We are back for part 2 out of 4 discussions today. Thank you all for joining us in our second year with the NeoCon Talk series. You know, last year we had a great series of conversations, and we're really grateful that the Mart invited us back to have a 2.0. We have a really good lineup for you all this year. Again, the talks are 20-minute conversations on a range of topics from a variety of speakers from all over the globe. And we want to welcome you to day 1 of our talk series. Thank you to our sponsors, Formica, 9 to 5 Seating, Dauphine, Garden on the Wall, and Via Seating. Also, right behind you guys, we have a Beatrix Coffee and Pastry Station, so you can refuel if need be. And in between the talks, Jordan from the Mart, in our lovely hot pink jacket behind you, is going to be doing some workplace trivia. And if you guys answer the question correctly, you can get a free coffee or pastry, so be sure to hang out and participate in that. And next up in our talk series is Democratizing Architecture with Tanya Khanna. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Katie, for the kind introduction. And thank you all for being here. So my talk is based on the premise that every building, every design, every product has a really unique story, and it needs to be told. So perception plays a very important part of our daily life. How we read the objects around us, whether it is art, how do we recognize it? Or popular cars, how do we distinguish them? Or landmark architecture, how do we read it? How do we view it? How do we understand the design that's all around us? I'm sure you all recognize these buildings. But our perception is often shaped by marketing, mythologies, the content that is all around us, which is driven by advertising. However, a large part of our built environment is experiential. We experience the spaces around us, and that is what shapes the spaces we occupy, the buildings we live in, the buildings we inhabit, the schools we study in, the workspaces, the homes that we live in, the offices that we go to, the malls that we go shop in, the hotels that we go live in, the restaurants that we go eat in. Unlike the other arts, whether it's music, theater, sciences, experiencing architecture and design and the built environment is not a matter of choice. We can't choose to occupy a space. We are in space all the time, whether we like it or not. Now, Victor Hugo very famously said that the city is a writing, and we, the users of the city, are the readers. However, the stuff that we read, which is all of this, is not care about the built environment. Architecture in the news is rarely happen. Architecture in a newspaper is a rare moment in time. And most often, I'm sorry, I think the presentation is getting warped. There's a different version, sorry. I'm going to pause for a second. That's okay. There's a PDF version. I'll continue with this. That's fine. That's fine. So architecture, most often, architecture and design stays within the closed confines of design media. Only other designers read design media. So as designers, we talk only to other designers. Globally, there are around 15,000 newspapers and 14,000 design magazines. And there are probably at least 5,000 design shows and awards and events that happen around the world. Unlike other professions that have mass engagement, where you talk to the society, you talk to the common man, as architects and designers, we only talk to other architects and designers. While data shows that it is spaces that impact our mental health, our well-being, rarely are buildings ever sold to us, unless it is real estate. In the daily rut of life, we rarely ever pause to see the building story. That's the hashtag we follow. Who was the architect? What was the architect's design? Why and how was a building made this way? Unless when we are asked to look, hey, it's a landmark building. Look, it's the WTC Tower. Look, it's the Guggenheim. I'm sure these are buildings you all know, and I don't need to name them. But the reality is that not all architecture is by star architects or the masters. And therefore, it is never packaged and sold to us as wow architecture. The building next door, the home next door, the office next door, the restaurant next door, the mall next door is seldom noticed, understood, forget ever being talked about. An interesting home may find some presence on Design. A nice restaurant will find itself on Arc Daily or Curbed or Design Boom or wherever, but only to find an audience with other designers, never by the masses at large. The ones who actually use the spaces, unfortunately, never read about the built environment and the design. We keep complaining of the pitiful state of our cities. We all complain about how the planning doesn't work, how there's so much traffic and how there's so much clutter, and look at climate change and look at what is happening. But as designers, we rarely ever talk and engage with the built environment. Who has the time to listen to a podcast on architecture? Who has the time to write or read about the built environment? Who in the common man is actually listening to a story about design? Apart from global warming and climate change, buildings contribute to 40% of energy consumption. City building is critical, and beyond the masters, our cities are shaped by designers like you and me. Rather than allowing a few icon makers to usurp this entire architectural agenda, it is important that as designers we write our own history. Instead of reducing the act of building to a second-rate activity, let's focus on it as the greatest responsibility of our time. Whilst more than 50% of the world's population lives in cities, instead of the master landmark buildings, it is actually the solo individual building next door that make up our cities. And that's the architecture we must also celebrate, which therefore then needs to be curated, conveyed, and communicated to the world and the society at large. Those engaging in making the places that we inhabit, almost 99% of the times do not talk about their work, and hence do not get talked about as a consequence. I don't need to name all of these designers. Like any successful person at the top of the game, it is the star architects who are often seen and known and heard. Critics line up to visit their buildings, they inform, they write about them, and the greatest victim of this influence is young designers, students who believe that you can only create signature buildings to impact the built environment. And the local humble building rarely gets known and seen and heard for what it is. Architects do themselves great injustice, and designers too, and even more injustice to their customers by choosing to not talk about their work. The art world has it all sorted. Everybody talks about their art. If you make a piece of art, you write about what was done, what was your intent, what was the story, what was the narrative. And process finds place in that narrative. I mean, that's Richard Serra at the Guggenheim. And he documented his entire process of creating the installation. But architects rarely celebrate their own work and occasionally get noticed in public buildings. If they do, it is mostly after being long gone, and therefore dialogue must be shaped around the bulk of the architecture and not just the gherkin. We need to move and take architecture out to the open. We need to move out of our silos. The tools are all available to us, and all this talking is not to be known. Like Michael Jackson said, it is for you and for me and for the entire human race. So are you ready to talk about architecture? Traditionally, we are taught that good design speaks for itself. In the current scenario of information overload, where there are more than 500 plus Instagram platforms, 300 plus LinkedIn platforms focusing only on design, content is driven by Instagram and LinkedIn and Pinterest and YouTube. Originality and creativity are often lost in a deluge of data. Architecture has long prided itself on storytelling through visual tools, having overlooked the potential that words have in creating meaning, enabling, and larger discourse. Thoughts and processes can be, and must be communicated using images, words, and color. Often, it takes excessive design to get noticed. or the death of a building to bring it into conversation. Occasionally, one asks, who was the architect? Public buildings and landmarks get recognized through a plaque. Some cities respect heritage and the architect, of course. The masters always get their due credit, but the local humble building stays unknown. And so, as designers, we must focus on who we are communicating to and not just the I in design. Content and not the designer is king, and every design has its unique story. Imagine the city to be an art gallery where every building came with descriptive text. This, however, is not possible. Buildings do not telecast their own stories. And therefore, in order to give architecture a distinct voice, a more inclusive voice, a more accessible voice, a content-based strategy therefore becomes a very critical tool in shaping the built environment. So why don't we get ready to read about architecture and to write about architecture? Over and above the star architecture that we all consume, the building next door and its designer need to be recognized through a distinct voice. While a picture is worth 1,000 words, we actually use words to communicate our design intent. Why does good writing matter? Because good writing matters regardless of any profession. Architecture determines everything that we inhabit. Frank Gehry said, no matter how talented architecture students or architects may be, their gifts are of not much use if no one knows about them. A vital step, therefore, towards success is to present oneself to others in the most favorable and accessible manner. No amount of snappy graphics or great drawings or great visuals can do justice over and above words to communicate your intent. When it comes to education, over 5,000 architecture schools in the world, 800 plus are in the US. That is the number of architecture students who actually graduate every year. But you can see that not many go out and practice. If you see the lower green color side on the right-hand side, that's the number of architects who actually end up practicing or designers who practice. Why is that? Why is the industry and our curriculum not equipping us to go out and practice? This means that not all students are choosing to go and practice design. The curriculum is teaching design, but is our curriculum teaching us to be professionals who can build sustainable and successful practices? How does one equip ourselves for the profession? The curriculum prioritizes design versus practice versus business, whereas the needs of the practice are business versus practice versus design. And so, again, our communication strategy needs to evolve. While these numbers show the employment opportunities today, they also show the state of the industry. As of June 2024, there are over 200 jobs in the marketing and the business side of design practice, and over 165 jobs in editorial teams. Yet, our curriculums and our colleges are not equipping us to do this. And when we start looking at numbers on Instagram and LinkedIn, we realize that the answers are actually in front of us. If one was to link all content-based communications to three primary goals, which is brand positioning, business development, and talent acquisition, the three pillars of practice, the business, the systems, all will come together to make businesses thrive and succeed. Beyond the greenwashing, beyond the curated images, beyond the sexy imagery, if I may say so, and definitely beyond the feed, let's ask ourselves, what is good design? What is content? We all need to step back and ask ourselves this question. It's entirely subjective, no? There are no thumb rules to good design. Authors of a book, any author who writes a book will not judge the book. Instead, they use the right to express. So for a minute, could we, as architects, as designers, become journalists and not magazine editors? No offense, Katie. But we all need to step back and look at our own content and not judge it, not worry about the perfect image being out there. I met so many people today who said, I just keep wondering, am I ready to put my content on Instagram or LinkedIn? Because we all are judging. We're all thinking we're magazine editors, and do we need to step back and wonder, what am I saying? But instead, if we have faith in our own content and believe in our design story, we're ready to go all out there. And let's approach storytelling from a whole new perspective, where authenticity is key, and we approach content with no biases at all. And carry these conversations not just to design shows and magazines, and carry it to radio, carry it to blogs, carry it to podcasts, carry it to architecture and design schools, and carry it to newsletters, and talk to young people, and talk to the Gen Z, and more. Let's keep ourselves, let's steer away from the jargon that we all designers talk in. Let's bridge the gap between the design fraternity and the readers, the viewers, the consumers of design. Before we put the pen or the pencil, or in this case today, the mouse to paper, and we should start looking at words and writing and the sketch. And today, even film is such an important tool in design. Let's take our content and absorb all these tools that are available to us through technology. We don't need to be worried about AI, because AI is going to help us put our content out there. It is going to help us communicate to the audience that is consuming design. We need to therefore bring all voices to the table. Everyone who influences or is influenced by the built environment. This is the act of democratization of architecture and design, which allows all stakeholders in the built environment to partake in and influence city making through only and only content. Our cities are for all, and therefore, so should the discourse be. Thank you very much. Do share your hashtag building story on Instagram or LinkedIn. You can find us there. I'm Tanya. I came all the way from India to do this. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Really appreciate it. So we're going to have a recording and a recap of each of the talks on our website, workdesign.com, so you can catch Tanya's whole discussion on work design. You can also subscribe for a free newsletter and make sure that you get the update right away when we have published all of the videos. So next up at 2:30 is Focused Excellence, Monotasking for Architects and Designers with Libby Gillen. See you guys in 10 minutes.